Hi, welcome back to the Art Biz podcast. I am so happy to share part two of my interview with Noelle Ferris. In part one, we talked about her transition from environmental scientist to full-time artist and the professional career choices that she has made along the way. In this episode, part two, we discuss how she runs her business, why she sets boundaries, why she thinks it's really important to offer artwork at various price points. It's all related to building her audience, which she prioritizes above everything but her art, it seems. Please enjoy my conversation with Noelle Ferris. Hi, Noelle. Welcome back. We are recording a second episode because the first one was so juicy. I wanted to continue our conversation. We talked in that episode about your museum project tracking time. We talked about your work and your vision for the work, for it telling a story and having meaning in people's lives. And we also talked about you collaborating with museum staff and another artist on the show. And that brings to mind the independence of an artist. So what does artistic independence mean to you? And how do you balance that with professional growth?
Yes, it's been about 8 years since I started painting full time. And one of the things that just makes me feel really independent at this point that wasn't the case at the beginning is just the ability to say no to things. And that has arisen in my career now because, there's more opportunity now than there was before, just because my audience has grown, my price points have grown, whatnot. So the ability to say no to things is really awesome because, it helps me be an active participator in like the shape that my work is going to go and the places that I'm going to show to. And so what that means is, having a pretty clear vision about how I want to use my time. Do I want to paint privately for, private collectors or institutions? I really don't anymore. I've said no to that because it's more important to me to create work that goes together and is seen by a larger audience. So I've been able to say no to commissions. Another thing that I've been able to say no to or just take an active role in is just I have spent a lot of time in the last couple of years showing really heavily around Colorado and specifically in Denver and Boulder, which is where I live. My core audience is here. I love it. But there's there's appetite for my work outside of Colorado, which I'm really grateful for. So, I made a clear choice not too long ago to just spend more time showing with institutions and galleries outside of Colorado and just grow my voice elsewhere and see, how my work can change with that different audience. And I have shown internationally before in a couple of locations, but being able to make some geographic choices too has been really nice. So I think the other one that's been important to me is I have friends and we all know artists who have kind of painted themselves into a niche that they don't really like. For example, I have a friend who is a pet portrait artist and she's awesome. She loves it and there's huge demand for her work. I was talking with her a while ago, but I remember the conversation so vividly. She's like, I don't want to paint pets anymore. I was like, I don't like painting animals. But like, that's what people want from me. That's what I have built a career around. And she feels quite trapped there. And there's not to say there isn't room to make changes for her or anyone who wants to make a big, subject or medium change. But I think that, I'm really grateful that kind of from the beginning, I thought about what is it that I want to paint about long term. It really comes back to my deep why, which is environmental stewardship. And I was landscape based from the very beginning. And I continue to be able to paint about, that's the brand I've built for myself is I built a brand around something that I was really passionate about. And I think that will hopefully continue for the rest of my life. So I don't feel hamstrung by this need to stay in a vein of artwork that, I'm not really passionate about. And then lastly, I am someone who doesn't like to paint the same thing twice. It stays interesting for me when I'm able to like continue evolving my style paint about new topics, new places. I've been writing a lot of poetry to go along with my work. I think from the very, very beginning, I've like shown a quick and committed evolution within the just creative output itself. So my audience expects that from me at this point, and I really like that. It like leaves me free to just continually grow and present new work. I'm always trying to make sure that my artistic voice is coherent enough for, someone to be able to look at a new piece and know that it was mine if they're familiar with my work. But again, this commitment to just like ever changing work stylistically and thematically has served me really well. That's like who I am as a person.
Yeah, you say ever changing, but you have a consistent, like, your work when you see it. Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that. Sometimes you get so close to it that, sometimes I'm like, my approach to this was really different, or my palette was really different, that I am like, I don't know if, this is consistent enough over time, but I have had that feedback before. It's really valuable to hear. That's another benefit of like working in this project-based world where I'm like painting exhibitions. I'm like, I got to keep all 30 pieces in this show coherent enough to be able to work with themselves, with each other in one show, but from one exhibition to the next. I leave a lot of room for changing materials. In one show, I will often have sizes ranging from 11 by 14 inches up to 60 by 48 or even double that. So there's just like a wide range of sizes in the show. I now paint, my favorite, surface to paint on is birch panel, but in a single show, I'll often have raw, unstretched canvas, paper, and panel, and sometimes stretch canvas as well. So just the ability to keep it interesting for myself and sort of move between mediums and surfaces just really keeps it interesting and dynamic for me, which is great.
Yeah. So you said that back at the beginning of that, you said that you're making conscious decisions to show outside of Colorado. And from a previous conversation that we had, I believe you have specifically decided not to seek gallery representation in Colorado because your audience is already here. You don't need the gallery. Is that right?
I do work with galleries here. I've shown at Space Gallery in Denver a number of times. Again, my last museum show was with the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art. So I think I'm fine with using institutional partners here. What I am pretty adamant about is making sure that there aren't strict exclusivity contracts within those arrangements, which means, I have a nice studio here. I built this studio in part so I could host events here. I try and do it annually. I'll have a studio party where I paint a new body of work, the only work I sell directly from my studio. I'll have live music and food and all these things, and like 300 or 400 people will come to those. I'll sell out sometimes, usually, which is awesome, but it like helps me keep my committed audience here engaged. I mean, I can talk to those people that I've been like talking to online via email for a long time. So that's really important to me. I don't want to work with a gallery who's like, no, you can't sell out of your studio anymore. And there are some galleries who have those requirements. And then the other thing is I've maintained a commitment to keeping a print business from the very beginning, which means I run archival prints of many of my finished paintings. I sell them online. I sell them through about 25 different retail shops around the country. I sell them from my studio. That helps pay the bills when I'm painting for 6 months. I know I won't sell any of those original paintings for a long time. It also keeps my price point super diverse. Original paintings are relatively very expensive these days. I want to be able to have my artwork in the homes of people who can only afford to pay $50 for print. So there are some galleries who are not okay with that, and that's fine. But I can't work with those people. I'm happy to think about timing and say, I won't release prints of any painting that's in an exhibition at your museum or your gallery until the duration of the show is over. That's totally fine. But that's kind of as far as I'm willing to go with exclusivity agreements.
Yeah. I love these boundaries. You started talking about saying no to things, and this is further setting boundaries with who and who you'll work with, what you're willing to compromise on. And I think this is so important. I'm calling it out because so many artists think that they don't have any power over what happens to
That's
them.
right.
And all of these relationships are partnerships. They depend on you just
That's true.
like you depend on them. They're interdependent and we need each other. And there is room for negotiation a lot of times.
Yeah, you're so right. And it's also a good reminder that, the ability to say no, it is a privilege. You have to kind of
Yeah.
earn the ability to do that. I said yes to everything at first because when you're new and you're operating in the red all the time, I had to say yes to like every art festival I got into because I needed the income. At this point, the work and time and just nature of the whole thing that goes into art festivals. Like it just doesn't really work for me anymore. I do have assistants that will take my work there, but I'm able to say no to that because I've been able to grow my career to a point where I have opportunities outside of just like the art festival realm.
Well,
It's a
hang on
privilege.
just a second.
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
to talk about that because the second time in the other episode, you mentioned your assistants taking work to arts
Yes.
festivals.
Hmm.
What are you looking for in a venue where you might send an assistant with your prints?
Right. Okay. That's a great question. Art festivals are such a good opportunity for audience building because just the foot traffic alone, just the exposure of just like eyes on the work is kind of unparalleled. I love a good gallery show. It's way better for resume building and all that, but just like the volume of eyes on the work is just a lot more limited in a lot of these institutional settings than they might be at an art festival. So, for so much, I'm still committed to audience building. For so much of my early career, like the way that I built this bigger audience was I showed at art festivals like the Jackson Hole Fine Art Festival, Crested Buttes, Cherry Creek in Denver, the Firefly Art Festival circuit. There were opportunities to go and bring a lot of reproduction. So I wasn't painting a whole new body of work, but I could go and sell, a huge amount in 2 days. They were like huge money making opportunities in a short amount of time and just audience building activities in a new geography where I maybe didn't have a previous audience. So at this point, I don't like doing art festivals because they're just a ton of work and it really cuts into my creative time to plan for an art festival. So over the last 5 years, I've been lucky enough to have a couple of assistants, one main one at this point, who are comfortable enough taking 500 prints in my whole art festival display, and they'll go bring that to an art festival, usually locally, but sometimes as far away as Southern California or the East Coast. I've got this great van where I can take all my stuff. And as long as it's an art festival where they can't be a fine art festival where they're committed to it being just original work and that exists. I used to do those. I don't do it anymore because again, I just think like the bang for my buck is greater showing that work in a gallery setting where I can create a whole exhibition. It's better for my resume. But if it can just be reproductions where they don't mind that I'm not there, I will have a couple of assistants go and they will go. And they're really good at talking about my work. My lead assistant, Callie, right now has been working with me for a couple of years. She knows how to present my work to the general public. We're pretty good at like putting out the sign up sheet for the email list and all that. And she'll come back with hundreds of email addresses from people who were walking by, saw the work, something drew their eye. They came, maybe they bought a print. They gave me their email address and now I've got them as part of, an audience that I can connect with later. So yeah, I think just like general exposure to a new audience and also sales opportunities too, because, running this business is expensive. I do have overhead. And when I really look at the breakdown of income sources, art festivals played a big role in my income streams in the past that I don't necessarily want to give up. So it's awesome to be able to have an assistant or group of assistants that can take care of all of the planning and logistical work, bringing all that stuff to an art festival, sitting there for a weekend, presenting my work to thousands of people, and then coming back. And I've kind of been able to stay pretty hands off the last couple of years, which is
Wow.
amazing.
Wow. And monetarily, it's always worth it for you.
It always is. I
Yeah.
mean, to be fair, I don't think that would be the case if I was presenting a product that wasn't attractive to a really large audience. You can't help it. Anyone who's been to an art festival before knows that like you can't help but just compare yourself to your neighbors, and whatever this outdoor or indoor art festival is, you're like always looking at the people around you being like, oh man, they're getting more business than me. Sometimes you're like comparing numbers. Art festivals really feel like a numbers game where you're like, it's a success if I've like made over X
Right.
amount of money. So anyways, I know there's a large range of sales that
Yeah.
happen at art festivals. I've been lucky enough to be, they've always been financially worth it. I am pretty good at running the numbers and just saying, okay, how much am I paying for labor since I'm not there? And of course, there's going to be some hit on just how attractive the work is and how much it's engaging the audience if I'm not physically there to do it. But generally, the cost benefit analysis proves out to having it be almost always attractive. There's one exception, and that is that many of the nicer galleries, like higher end galleries, institutions, don't like working with artists that show at art festivals because they're just like different levels of showing work. So that's another reason why I've kind of pulled back a little bit. I work with some galleries that are not really that excited about that these days. So I don't do 20 art festivals a year. As an assistant will go to a handful a year. So it's just a smaller part of my presence.
Gotcha.
And I can
Gotcha.
commit my time to the gallery stuff.
It is so easy to shine a spotlight on Noelle and artists like Noelle because they're very articulate about their work. They know what their work's about and where it's going, and they're able to speak about it. Not everyone, I have learned in all my years of doing the podcast and all my years of coaching artists, not everyone's able to do this. This is why I love so much to help artists find their voice. And I have a tool for you. It's brand new, from studio to spotlight. I came up with 28 prompts. If I were interviewing you, these are the prompts that I would use to help you get your story out, to pull that story out of you. So what I want you to do is download this and start journaling based on my prompts. I know it's going to help you with your marketing message. It's going to contribute to your artist statement, your bio, your interviews. I'm hoping it puts you in the spotlight and that you have lots of interviews. You'll have text for press releases and grant applications, your website, and so much more. It's not that you haven't cared to this point. It's just that no one gave you the right questions. And with the right questions, you can be prepared for anything. So check it out. It's at artbizsuccess.com/SM. Totally free. artbizsuccess.com/SM. Well, let's talk a little bit more about what your assistants do with you, for you, and with
Yeah.
you, and how you built up that kind of support.
Yes, man, I know how scary it is to start paying someone when you're running a small business. And that's what being an artist is, of course. I think probably a year and a half into making this career change to working artist, art festivals, selling a lot of prints online. There was so much work to do that was not the creative work. I'm talking packaging prints, processing orders, shipping, framing, all that stuff that didn't require me to do, but I was doing it. And another opportunity for a pretty quick cost benefit analysis. I'd gotten to the point where I was like, if this is what this career is, I don't know if this is the right one for me because I'm just, I'm not able to spend that much time painting. There's so much other work to be done. And a quick cost benefit analysis kind of revealed to me that I could pay someone else, an art student, someone who could like benefit from spending some time in a professional studio, making $25 an hour, packaging prints, whatever it was. I could pay someone that money and my time could be then put back towards the painting. The marketing, and kind of maintaining, relationships with collectors and planners at these institutions. That's where I try and keep my time these days. So I hired a assistant for about 2 days a week back then. I would have them come in and we would kind of work together to stepped back. I was doing a lot of our Etsy orders. At some point I was able to hand all that stuff off. And over the last 5, 6 years, I have moved So almost everything that's not those, few categories I spoke about earlier, which is mostly the creative work and the marketing, I've handed that all off to assistants. So I have a space in my studio that's separate from my main workspace where my lead assistant, who works almost full time, spends all of her time, and she does all of the order processing, the shipping, the inventory management, the relationship and inventory management with my wholesale partners. She does framing, she does canvas prep, she does art festivals. I have like a kind of crew of just flex contractors who are able, they all have other jobs. They come in seasonally because holidays are always big for artists. I definitely have a big seasonal rush. They'll come in, I'll have 5 people, coming and working for many days around the holidays. And then for art festivals, I'll have multiple people come in where Callie, my lead assistant, is like managing that. She's the boss of that process. And I can be pretty hands off, and it'll be her and 3 other people setting up, breaking down art festivals. Sometimes it's weeks of preps before art festivals, just packaging prints, framing prints, getting all that stuff done. And it's freed me up to stay committed to the creative work, and also managing people is a lot. So I've been able to find lead assistants who are able to manage people that work under them too for, some of the less skilled work. It's just been such a game changer. It's been such a game changer. I'm really grateful for it.
So if you have 5 people working in that space, it is not a small space, but you can't fit 400 people in that one space at once. Does it allow you, are you able to work? Are you able to paint when there are that many people there?
I mean, when I have 4 people working, it's, crunch time around the holidays. So sometimes those will be like all hands on deck portions of time where I am also contributing. But to be fair, I've kind of been able to collect a group of folks who are very comfortable with each other. So some tight conditions are not that big of a deal. And it's short amounts of time. I'm talking like, the week after Black Friday sales happen, I'll have 5 people in here. Maybe a week or 2 before that, where they're like doing product prep in preparation for that. So yeah, I also, I wear noise canceling headphones all day, every day, even in my own studio, because sometimes there's people working in here too. And I have just gotten to a point where I am fine with having someone looking over my head a little bit while I'm painting. It's not common though. I'm lucky to have a studio where my full-time assistant, she spends most of her time in our print studio, which is next door, and I can have solo time in here to focus. So it's been really nice.
Gotcha. I don't think I saw that. So that was, oh yeah. Next trip, I'm going to go see it.
Yeah, exactly. I do actually outsource some stuff too. I mean, that's all stuff we do in-house, but fully out of house. Like, I work with a professional printmaker who is in another state. They do all of our printmaking.
I really appreciate your going through this and going through the lists of tasks that you delegate to other people, because so many artists have a hard time. They think that no one's going to do it as good as they are. They know how to do it. Right. Nobody else does. And here's the other thing that happens is that they think, it's just faster to do it myself. I have to train someone, which is why I spend a lot of my time with clients helping them set up policies, procedures, and forms that they can then hand off to other people so that people know exactly how they want something done. I love that you mentioned your cost benefit analysis. You know what your time is worth. You know where your time is best spent. And you said painting and marketing. Those are the 2 tasks that you keep for yourself.
Painting, marketing, and planning.
And planning. Say. Well, so this is, a lot of my clients want to get rid of the marketing part. Why do you hang on to that?
I mean, I think one of my like sweet spots as an artist is just, I've been told so many times, like, I love hearing your voice around your work. Again, I create work that I hope is beautiful, but it's like layered with symbolism that requires me to interpret it, whether that's through, my email marketing, or like the in-depth descriptions I write on my website, or the social media stuff. I feel like I need to interpret it with words, whether that's spoken or written, for the storytelling component to come through and like the real meaning of the work to come through. So I have to be involved in that part of it. Yeah. And I also just, I think authenticity is, it's palpable to
Yeah.
people. Allison, you and I were just talking about AI a little bit before this, and I spend a lot of time writing about each piece. I contribute to the writings and the catalogs or whatever kind of marketing stuff and PR stuff that goes out around a show. I have experimented, of course, like everyone, with just like plugging parts of that into AI tools to kind of simplify that. And I'm never happy with the results. Like my voice, thank God, is just stronger here. So it's just really important to me.
Yeah.
That's like part of the bread and butter of this work to me, is how it gets interpreted to a wider audience. And it's just got to be my voice.
Well, it's your
And I like that
voice.
part of it. I also
Yeah.
like that part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. You are a natural, I think, just based on meeting you in person, you're a natural connector and you use your voice to connect with people and build relationships, which, then result in relationships with the artwork. And I think that's something you cannot outsource to a marketing. I get pitched
Oh my gosh,
a
yes.
lot for this podcast, and it is I, those people that are pitching are doing such a disservice to their clients because very few of them match or know anything about, like, they're not trying to build a relationship with me. They're just trying to check off boxes to see how many people how many emails they can
Gotcha.
send out or whatever. And it's very different than, I think marketing is just about building relationships. So,
You're
yeah.
so right. I mean,
Oh,
it's still the fine art world. It's still really relationship heavy.
mhm.
As much as I wish, getting into a better gallery or moving the work to a bigger institution was fully merit based, it's not. You got to know people. So, my mother-in-law is an artist. She's had a thriving art career her whole life, and she's just someone who goes to every opening. She goes to every opening, and I'm not quite that person, but over the years, she's been like, you gotta do the in-person work
Yeah.
to meet the curator of whatever, so you can create that relationship down the road that's going to lead to your next show. And she's not wrong. I'm happy that we live in an era where the internet allows us to kind of spread our voices farther than it would by themselves, but it's just the relationship part's not going to go away. So
Right.
luckily, I like that part. I feel bad for artists who don't.
Right. Exactly.
Be
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. So, winding down here, thinking back on the decisions or actions that you've taken around your career, what's made the biggest difference, do you think, to get you where you are today?
I mentioned this earlier, but I think my number one thing was just always having a sincere commitment to a topic that I was really passionate about, independent of art, independent of like whatever shape the job looked like. That's made it so I didn't go to art school at this point. Of course, having better technical skills would have been nice, but like I had this career beforehand that really shaped what I care about as a human, and that has carried me a long ways. And I think that that is what people have connected with in my work. Is I think the why is just evident to folks. And I'm also lucky that what I care about is something that's just, a lot of people do care about. People care
Yeah.
about preserving the landscapes that they love. So I think just choosing, then that was kind of happenstance. I happened to choose a topic that like there was a wide appetite for. A couple other things. I had been lucky enough to have a partner from the beginning who was really supportive of this career in the arts. My husband went to Amherst, studied sculpture and fine art. He comes from a family of artists. Amazingly enough, he, after college, got into tech, started a company. He works in tech now. He kind of did the opposite thing that I did, but he has always understood my drive for this artistic work, and he just gets it and he really respects it. And I'm so grateful for that. So having just a partner that can help me problem solve the business perspective. He's also been so instrumental in like helping design the studio. He has built so many of my art festival displays, and just thinking through, I have this awesome wall easel that I paint like all my big pieces on in the studio. It takes up no space because it's on the wall. My husband is like a natural engineer and spatial problem solver, and not everyone has this asset behind them, but he's been so awesome. And then My commitment to maintaining diverse products and price points has just served me really well over time. I have people who buy my calendars for 25 bucks every year, and I have people who I've never met who will buy, an 8 by 4 foot painting for a lot of money at a gallery that I'll never meet, and like everywhere in between. And I love that because my work, again, I hope that it inspires people to care more about the landscapes they're looking at those pieces. And the more people that can own the work, I think the greater that footprint is. And it keeps my business a little sturdier against things like economic recessions. When 2020 hit and people were, we've had a lot of rumblings with economic instability lately, and the fine art market has gone through many tumbles in the last many years. And luckily, the lower price point prints, they keep selling. So I think just having that stability has been really valuable over time.
Yeah. Yeah. I am impressed by your commitment to maintaining a vision for the work and for the path that you want to take, which isn't always evident with some artists. So I'll just put that in there.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you're doing this all with a toddler.
I have a 2-year-old. She is awesome. Yes, I think that parenthood has been like one of the greatest surprises of my life. I'm not someone who grew up and spent my adult years thinking I was dying to be a parent. It happened. My husband really wanted it. I'm kind of like down for an adventure. So I said, okay, let's do it. And it's been great. And honestly, having a job I love and being able to come to the studio 8 hours a day, got a great nanny, it's kept me like really balanced and sane throughout just the challenges of parenthood. So that's really nice.
Right. Yes, you are. You're a better person. I'm a better person and a better parent because you're allowed to do that. I'm sure. What
So.
advice would you give to artists who are determined to chart their own course and retain control of their careers and businesses?
Yes, I think that a thriving art career requires, there's so many different ways to shape it, but it requires momentum. It really does. If you're trying to build, you have to have an audience if you're going to sell artwork, and momentum and constant work is required to build and then, continue growing that audience. So I would say, a rigorous work ethic, and if you can, the ability to go all in, at least for me, was just huge. It takes a lot of work to, do the creative work, grow technically, which matters too. Not only do the people buying your work want to see your work get better over time, but institutions do too. When a gallery is, considering taking you on, they'll look through your past work. They want to see your CV. They want to see, are you growing over time? Because they want to know that your work is going to continue growing in value. So going all in, if you can do it, is huge. Not everyone can do it. I get that, but that's awesome. I think that, don't be afraid to hire and outsource the stuff you don't want to do. It's scary at first, but, paying someone 20 bucks an hour for the first few months, it might throw you in the red for a while. It did for me too, but long term, and not that far after that, I saw real gains in the amount of income that was coming in, right? Because my creative work was just generating so much more money than the time it was taking me to package prints, for example. And then I think maybe the most important one is just you gotta have confidence in yourself and your work. It's the scariest part about diving into some sort of professional art careers. Like, there are so many different ways to do it. You really have to be the number one advocate for your own work. And we all come from, different confidence levels and personality types. But I'd say if you're feeling really insecure about the work you're putting out there, spend more time on your own personal art education or whatever it is, so that you have, I think, some stronger legs to stand on when it comes to just presenting your work to the world and being able to stand behind it.
Confidence in the work is paramount. Paramount, I would say. Right. Yeah. All right. Wrapping this up now, what is what are you working on that is exciting or that you're looking forward to? What's ahead in the next year, let's say?
Yes. Well, I am right now revisiting and wrapping up a body of work that I started a couple years ago. I did like a short kind of personal residency in southern France a couple years ago. Started it, loved the vision, had to put it aside for some other exhibitions that were already scheduled. And I picked that back up a few months ago. And now that work is scheduled. So it's all kind of based around French landscapes. There's not as much of an environmental bent, but there's a very personal one there. I was carrying my first child when I started that work. I had a lot of thoughts about impending parenthood and just kind of the feminine relationship to nature during that time. And actually, big news for me, I'm carrying a second child right now, my second last. So I'm so excited to be revisiting that topic with this work.
Perfect.
And that work
Perfect
is for a solo show that opens in San Francisco at Cole Gallery. That opens July 11th. I will be there for the opening of that. It's my first time working with this gallery. I'm pretty excited about it. They're also bringing some pieces of mine to the San Francisco Art Fair this weekend. And then I think the other big thing that I'm excited about right now is just we spent a lot of time talking about my Colorado River show. For the first time ever, I decided not to sell that work when that show was being presented at the museum in Boulder. And I did that because I just felt like there was more that I could do on that topic. It was a bit of a leap of faith because, at least for me at this point in my career, like the biggest sales opportunity is right when a show opens.
Right.
So to decide to hold that work back and sell it hopefully later was, it required some confidence in my ability to, maintain active, interested collectors potentially over the course of years, because I'm not going to sell these paintings for years. But I wanted it to move hopefully to an institution in LA. I think LA is a great art hub. It's also, one of the last major city along. It's far from the river, but it's the last major city kind of along the river's course that gets a large amount of water from it. So I can't say nothing's set in stone yet, but I've learned a lot about sort of moving a body of work from one institution to another in the last few months. And we are working on finding a new home for it at an institution in Los Angeles. More to come on that, but I will probably add a bit to the work and, work with some very different organizations on kind of collaborative programming there. So that's what I'm excited about right now. It's really fun stuff to look forward to.
That's very exciting. And for those of you who missed it, the first interview, part 1 with Noelle, is when we talked about that Colorado River project. So Noelle, thank you so much for sharing this. Your work is wonderful. Your story is inspiring. And I know a lot of artists are going to get a lot of value in what you've had to share.
Thank you so much. It was really fun to revisit some of these topics. And I don't know, I think artists should take every opportunity to just reflect and talk about their work, because we all need to keep refining our whys and our artist statements. And honestly, interviews like this, doing the prep for it and all that stuff, it's just such a good opportunity to think back about why we do what we do and where we want to go. So thank you, Allison. It was really lovely to talk to you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Noelle Ferris, and I hope that it inspires you to focus a little bit of your time, maybe a lot of your time, on building an audience. What actions can you take today around that? I also want to encourage you to watch part 1, episode 224. As always, if you would rather listen to the Art Biz rather than watch it here, check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for making room for me in your artist life.